What if your company could triple its capacity without hiring a single new person? Today's guest, Tullio Siragusa, has helped companies generate over $3 billion in revenue and navigate more than $2 billion in successful exits. But here's what makes him different. He does it by combining emotional intelligence, neuroscience, and system design, not just spreadsheets and strategy decks. Tullio is the creator of the Empathic framework, founder of Inventrica Advisory, and a trusted advisor to academic institutions and AI think tanks alike. His approach to scaling without burnout, building self-managed organizations, and using empathy as a competitive advantage is flipping traditional leadership models on their head. I'm really excited to have him with us today. He's here to challenge how we think about growth, culture, and leadership in the modern workplace and share real-world strategies that work both for scrappy startups and billion-dollar enterprises. Tullio, welcome to the show. I've been looking forward to this conversation for weeks.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it as well.
So let's start with scale. You've helped companies reach over $3 billion in revenue. When you walk into a business, what tells you that it's not actually designed to scale?
Well, the first thing I notice is the decision-making bottlenecks. If everything flows through the founder or a handful of leaders, that's a red flag. You'll also see disjointed systems, teams that are working really hard, but they're not working in sync. It's sort of like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And when growth is tied to individual heroics instead of systemic capabilities, that's also another red flag. And that's when I know that scale will break instead of grow with them.
Interesting. What's the biggest myth about growth that keeps founders and CEOs stuck, especially during post-funding or the post-exit phases?
So I think one of the thing I noticed the most is specifically, for example, in startups, when they reach a certain revenue number and they start to do another round of funding, the mindset is, okay, we've got to go hire people now. And you end up hiring a bunch of VPs, usually VP of sales or marketing or VP of customer success. And they're not really building out team. They're like individual contributor / coach who might have another person working for them. So it's like a team of two. Now you're holding $1 million a year burn rate for very mini teams, and scaling more people and more headcount doesn't exactly equate to more growth. And I see this constantly after funding round or exits, because leaders think the next stage is about hiring fast. But if your systems are set up in such a way where you can't scale, they're not set up to create collaboration, they have too many silos, which happens when you hire these 4 VPs and they create their own mini micro teams, you've ended up with 4 or 5 different silos. What happens is real growth is stifled because there's friction there. And growth comes from removing friction. The less frictionless the experience, the more growth you can have. Every one of those mini kingdoms, it's a friction point. Silos equal friction points. So the biggest myth is that you scale by hiring more people. And it's quite the opposite. You can scale faster by removing friction, by creating more collaboration. That doesn't necessarily equate to more people.
I don't remember who it was, otherwise I'd be happy to cite them, but I read a lot, and someone made a quote that has always stuck with me. It said, you grow out of desire, not out of demand, or you grow out of demand, not out of desire. You add the people in accordance with what your systems and what the work requires, not like, oh, we desire to grow, so we're just going to add these people and we'll figure out how to make it happen. I appreciate and respect what you're saying there, and I agree with you.
I think the biggest challenge is that a lot of companies don't put enough attention on the value of learning and growing together.
Can you expound on that a bit?
Yeah. You can institutionalize the process of learning and growing. If you could bring a scientific approach to building your business, you become unstoppable. And what I mean by a scientific approach, when you think of science, every discovery has been made through a number of permutations that have been nothing more but a slew of failures, or the way I like to call them, successful ways to prove a method that didn't work. So when in science, it's built into the success equation, failures built into the success equation. And I want to repeat that because this is an important distinction that science has adopted over the years in terms of discoveries. You go through a lot of trials to find the right formula. But in business, somehow we don't follow that process. And partly because we're still holding on to the Industrial Revolution way of doing things. So let's just talk about that for a second. It took about 400 years before the Industrial Revolution took flight from the agricultural age. Like it took that long to realize the value of the Industrial Revolution because we held on to our old ways of doing things. Now, in the Industrial Revolution, you had very direct type of processes, rigid processes, because they were designed to safeguard people's lives. If you're manufacturing something, you can't have too many mistakes. You have to have processes which safeguards people's lives. So it was a matter of life or death, not following rigid processes, right? So it served its purpose. But in the knowledge age, that command and control, rigid approach to doing things, systematic approach of doing things, it doesn't work because it stifles innovation. It stifles the human element of what makes knowledge become wisdom. And so what you end up having is these behaviors where instead of learning and growing and collaborating together, everyone is making sure they're fitting into the model that checks off the boxes of having all these things in place. So how companies grow is very systemic with checking off the boxes. It's like we're still doing manufacturing. The way we run our business is like we're still doing manufacturing. It couldn't be the farthest thing from being wrong. We're not manufacturing anything. We're operationalizing the intelligence and the ability of people. And in order to get the best out of that, you have to get them growing and learning together and be able to create a model where you can take risks collectively and learn through those collective wisdom, the things that don't work, and make sure you're pivoting along the way to get to a place that you can codify the success ongoing.
Can you give me an example of what that looks like at maybe one of your client companies? What does that look like?
So, for example, quite often, one of the first things I do with clients is a force field analysis. It was invented in the 1950s. And think of it this way. When you're working towards a goal, it's like you have a bunch of people pushing a boulder up a mountain. Those are the things that are working to your advantage towards achieving that goal. On the other side of the boulder, you have hidden forces and some visible forces that are pushing against you. So you're pushing the boulder up the mountain, but you've got stuff pushing against you. So it's a constant battle. And most organizations aren't aware of a lot of those hidden forces. Some of them are internal, some of them are external. Those are what I call friction points, right? So, and those friction points could be psychological, cultural, or operational. So what I uncover is what are those friction points? And we have a very raw and honest conversation. And it's usually not just with the leadership. It's a collective input. So one of the requirements for these force field analysis is to have representation from every department in the organization. Because what I'm looking for is the truth, is the hidden truth of what's truly going on. Now, when you identify those things...
That's not an easy task.
No, it's not.
That's not something I want to gloss over.
That tool's phenomenal for doing it. I learned it in McKinsey and Company over almost 30 years ago, and I have really worked on it. I've done it for post-M&A integration efforts. I've done it for reorganizational efforts. I use it even from account planning perspective. It's a fantastic tool. You can even use it for your personal life.
It's very smart of you to bring in all of the people from the different departments, because I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but there are so many business owners and executives who get a watered down version of what the truth is, because the people between where the rubber meets the road and where they are have a vested interest in making sure the boss doesn't hear bad news.
Right.
And they don't want to be blamed for it.
That's a mistake, because
of course it is.
You're limiting your view. It's like an ostrich with its head in the sand.
Correct.
If you're an executive who doesn't like real raw feedback, you're like an ostrich with your head in the sand. Or you might be a megalomaniac, you might need some therapy, and that happens too, right?
It does.
What you don't want is everybody to just agree with you just to validate you. You actually want the truth, and you can argue to get to the truth, because ultimately it's about the company.
And the hard thing about that, without a system like what you're describing, where everyone's involved, is if you just have one person who is speaking the truth and it's not popular and the boss doesn't want to hear it, it can be very easy for the boss or the executives to get rid of the one troublemaker whose definition of troublemaker is someone who's just not bending the knee and complying with their every single wish, because they're actually got some ethics and they're saying, hey, boss, this is an issue. This is important. We need to do it. And the boss doesn't want to hear that. And some executives will make it easier just to get rid of that voice than to address the issues, which they should. But in the environment you're describing, it makes it safer, because there are everyone there sees what's going on. And I would imagine that if you had an executive who did the ostrich move and did have their head in the sand, that they might pull it out if everyone across these department heads were saying, this is real, this is real, this is real, this is real. So I respect and appreciate your approach to that.
Most bosses that operate that way, they wouldn't be open to this kind of analysis, right?
Right.
It's the dirty secret of the megalomaniac is that they're incredibly insecure. So their validation of themselves or their own worth is based on how many people agree with them. So if you don't agree with them, it's death through insecurity for you. You're literally threatening their own sense of self-worth. That's why they fire people that don't agree with them. They're incredibly insecure. But the way I do this analysis, it creates a safe environment for people to talk about, because they're not talking about individuals or departments. They're just bubbling up what they're seeing. And I usually start with the positive, right? So everyone's feeling good about everything the company's done. And then let's talk about what's really going on, what's working against this, what's not in place, what could be in place, what tailwinds exist or what headwinds exist in the marketplace, your competitors and so on and so forth. And the way I think about it is this: when you are working on yourself to transform yourself to be becoming something greater than you are today, the very foundational work you have to do initially to activate emotional intelligence is self-awareness. That is foundational to being able to go to where you are right now to where you want to be. And that self-awareness is the part that allows you to not live in your aspirational truth. Because many of us have a version of who we want to be. That's our aspirational truth, but we state it as if we're there. That's right. Lacking self-awareness. So what happens is you're starting at a point which is your aspirational version of yourself, and you're trying to get from this point to a higher point, but you're kind of down here still. So there are steps you're skipping, which is why people often struggle. It's like, I can't break through. Well, because you're not starting at the point where you need to be starting, which requires honesty, self-honesty. So that self-awareness is the beginning of growth for an individual. But how do you create a collective self-awareness for a company? So the way I do it is I treat the company like a living organism. And all we're doing is collectively identifying where the company is in reality through this self-awareness exercise. And then I can uncover where we need to go based on that. But the way we do it is we practice doing it collectively. And then once you identify all the things that we need to work on, the next step is I get people collaborating towards those things they need to work on by introducing collaborative OKRs, which, they're different. They're not owner-based. There's champions, there's supporters, and there's observers. So I introduce this idea of everyone can participate on these things. Pick the goals that resonate the most with you, participate on those teams, become members of that leadership team. And if there's something you've never done that you want to learn about, join that team as an observer. And quite often when those teams get together to move the needle and move the ball forward, the observers offer some incredible insights, wisdom that comes out of nowhere.
I love what you're talking about. What you're talking about, I love this, because as decision makers, your decision are only as sound as the facts on which they're based. And you can't be everywhere and you can't see everything. And you have to rely on the leaders who are all throughout your organization. And if they don't feel listened to, or they don't feel part of, or they don't feel engaged in the process, then you're kind of out on an island by yourself. And that's a lot tougher. And
absolutely,
I love what you're talking about.
This system activates the 4 critical tenets of a highly engaged culture.
What are those?
So when I co-founded radicalpurpose.org, there were a bunch of self-management practitioners that came together. Morningstar practitioner, Teal practitioner, sociocracy, holography, all these different systems, self-management system. We all came together. Some of what I call royalty of self-management were my co-founders. And we also had organizational psychologists that joined. And for 2 years, we dug into what creates highly engaged cultures. And we landed on 4 tenets. And those 4 tenets happen to be the truth of what matters to each and every one of us as human beings. Number 1, it's the need to belong to something greater than ourselves, which is why religion and politics is so big. Number 2, it's the ability to have meaning behind what we're doing. Same reason why those systems are also very big, and why people have families, and why people start things and create things. You're trying to put meaning behind your life, right? Number 3 is the ability to make an impact, to have an impact. That's why people join and become entrepreneurs. That's why people join movements, activism, having a family, building a house, creating something. It's the ability to have an impact. Number four is the ability to be becoming, to become something greater than you are, which is why the self-help industry is like, what, $1 trillion? It's
Sure.
an innate desire to become more. So what I'm introducing through these collaborative efforts is this idea of belonging to something greater than yourself, because we're opening it up to everyone in the organization. So now if you're a software developer and there's a need to refine the go-to-market strategy, you may have never worked on a go-to-market strategy. You may never get a chance to work on a go-to-market strategy, but you're like, I'm really curious about what that's about. Now I get to participate on something that I normally would have never gotten a chance to participate in. So I get to be becoming, but I also have some input there. So I have an impact. And that makes me feel like I'm part of something greater than just my department, my silo, right? And it gives more meaning to what I'm doing because I get to participate in the bigger picture and do more. So we're activating these principles in this process of collaborating. And then week in, week out, we do weekly stand-ups, like very agile stand-ups, where we track the results, what's moving, and we do a yellow, red, green flag approach to it. And we talk about the yellow flags. And the yellow flags are basically opportunities to say, I need some help. I've hit a snag or we're hit a challenge. We'd love some help. So it's not so much as like, I'm off track, I'm not doing my job, right? And a red flag is more about, we've taken on more than we can chew, and maybe we should hold off. This is not the right quarter to pursue this. We don't have the right settings in place. It's not a sign of a failure. It's a sign that we took on more than we could chew. And a green flag, hey, we don't need to talk about the stuff that are in traction because we got 20 minutes to do the stand-up, right? So what ends up happening over a couple of quarters, you've got an environment where everything used to funnel from the top down, and that's being turned upside down. Now you've got everyone collaborating equally. And one of the things I encourage the executive team is participate in this process with a sense of equivalence. In other words, don't be the boss in this process. Participate like everybody else. You'll have visibility, transparency into what's going on. You have experience so you can coach the team. You could be a champion for a lot of these things, but you're not the owner. We're trying to create a model where people step into leadership as well and take ownership of what the organization needs. What that requires over time is more transparency. Let the team know what's going on in the business. Share the financials in the business. As you get better at this, the team will be more than happy to take on more challenges because they're coming at it from a place of ownership. They're not, somebody else isn't dictating what they need to do. They have created what needs to happen. Now, here's the beautiful thing about doing this collaboratively. When you're going through a transformation, if you just do it at the top and you decide what needs to happen, now you got to go on this process, this change management process where you got to go sell it to the organization, convince the organization why it's a good idea. And nobody feels good about it because nobody likes, we're adults, we're not children. No one wants to be told what to do. So you get resistance and it takes a long time to get adoption. And in some cases, the adoption fails. And you're like, well, the plan was good. The plan was good from a limited point of view. You didn't get the collective wisdom of what the company was willing to do and gave ownership to the company from the beginning. You decided and pushed it down.
People don't argue or resist what they consider their own ideas.
Exactly. So when you have people collaborating and inputting on what we need to focus on, they already own it. There's no selling. They're part of the process. It's built in. So things move faster and with less friction. All I'm doing in everything that I do, Mason, is removing friction. Friction is the enemy of all business.
It is.
The less friction, the better. And that's not just internal friction. That's also friction of how your clients do business with you. The less friction your clients have doing business with you, the easier you are to do business with, the better you succeed in the marketplace. And this can't be disconjointed. You can't have less friction with the clients without less friction internally. They have to be in sync. And so when we look at
piggyback on what you're saying there.
Pardon?
When you talk about friction as a client, I've mentioned this in one of my other podcasts, but I've got banking relationships with multiple banks, but I fired one of my bankers that I have been using for a long time because it became hard work to be a customer. And regular part of our conversation, the words were used, well, you have to log into our app. You have to create a password. You have to stop by the bank. You have to come in. And I heard you have to so many times. I'm like, I don't work for you. Those were points of friction that were absolutely unnecessary. And by stark contrast, the bank I switched to used the exact opposite of those words. we'll do this for you so you don't have to. And I was like, I found my home. And so when you talk about friction as a customer, that's a very hot button for me right now as a customer. And same things apply inside a company.
I guarantee you the bank you left, the employees are not happy there.
I guarantee you're right.
And the bank you just went to, the employees are happier there because you can't fake that. It has to be systemic. The entire organization has to operate that way in order for it to be reflected into the marketplace.
And when I tried to tell them,
it doesn't come out as genuine because they're not living it.
It's interesting you said that, because when I told them, like, look, I'm going to leave, this isn't acceptable. They're like, well, you're going to leave anyway, like literally, so we don't care. Like,
because the employees don't care to be there either.
They don't. They straight up told me, like,
well,
you're going to leave anyway, so why bother? And I'm like,
it's a reflection of the culture. It's a reflection of the culture.
So speaking of cultures, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it. Is it empathic? Because I know it's spelled
IQ. I call it the Empath IQ framework, but it can be said.
Okay, and I mispronounced it. So Empath IQ framework claims to triple a company's capacity without increasing headcount. And I know that sounds grandiose, but what does that actually look like in practice?
Well, it starts by identifying the friction points that I mentioned, right? And it's often psychological, cultural, and operational. So I look at all three elements. And then here's the thing. When you remove the silos, because that takes time, like a department has to go talk to another department head and another department head, and then they have to get a rubber stamp of approval. That whole thing takes so much time. When you start acting collaboratively into pods and you break those silos down, things move very quickly. So what often happens is the reason you need more people is because there's so many steps, you need more bandwidth. But when you remove all those little friction points, you compress the bandwidth. You get more done faster.
People get to do what they do best and like to do most also.
That's true. And then there's also this other piece, right? This is why it's so important. And the best way I can describe this is I often give this example of a baby elephant tied to a pole. It tries to break free over and over for years, but it can't. It's not strong enough. And then the elephant becomes a behemoth giant. And it's so strong, it could break free of that pole like this, but it doesn't even try because it believes it can't. So when you are transforming your business, or you're going into growth mode, or you're going from the as is to where you want to be, the mindset of the team plays a big role in their ability to step into that capacity. So if there's belief systems that are limiting, you have to rewire those belief systems in order to step into that future state. Now, what a lot of companies do is they fire those teams and bring in a new staff that has that mindset to move it forward. That's very typical of what happens. And you're taking a risk that those people that you're hiring actually have that mindset. Right? So what I do is I use neuroscience technique to identify the individuals that are sort of have the baby elephant mindset and help them rewire.
Can you give me an example of that? What does that look like?
Well, for example, I'll give you one example. I actually had one coaching client, a serial entrepreneur. And what I discovered with him was that he sort of gets things in motion, but then says, I always kind of reach this wall that I don't follow through past it. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. Something must have happened when you were younger. I'm like, was there something before you were 9? Was there a moment where you wanted to do something, but someone made you feel like you couldn't? And he was like, yeah. I was 7 years old and I love art, but I wasn't very good at it. And a teacher said, yeah, there's no future for you in art. And so I stopped trying. So you created this belief that even if you love something, eventually you should give up because maybe you're not good at it. So could you see how that belief is not serving you today? Because you start a business and then you have a belief, maybe you're not good at this, so you should stop before someone rejects you or puts you down. So you're stopped because you're trying to avoid the pain that you experienced when you're 7-year-old, when someone let you down and told you weren't good at art. So we had to create a new mantra that changed that belief. So he could feel like he is deserving of success, that he is going to be able to follow through. And it's a 90-day process. It doesn't happen overnight. But after 90 days, it changed him dramatically. He successfully grew that business, continued to grow the business. And then we coached again, we identified some other issues, some belief around follow-up or some complacency. And we worked through that one because there's always more.
I imagine one of the biggest challenges for those folks is just even identifying the disempowering beliefs first. Because then when you really think about it as an adult, looking back at it, like you can understand where a child would have felt that way. But as an adult, you can look back at that and say, wow, like that is ludicrous, and that is an obstacle for me. And I can make the choice to move past that, just like the baby elephant, when it grows up, can make the choice to pull on that post
Yeah.
again and get out. Like, I get it.
For me, it's so much training, but it's also a gift. Because I personally experienced that. I would get to a point that I would just sabotage myself. Like I couldn't break through the ceiling. I felt like I was cursed. And I had a neuroscience coach who helped me break through my own limiting beliefs. And I fell in love with it because I was like, I need to learn this so I can help my team. If my team is ever challenged with hitting that wall, I want to be able to help them. I want to be a better leader by being of service to them. So I learned those principles just to be a better leader. And then it's become part of my practice now as a fractional executive and as a coach. But it's so powerful because you can have the most amazing plan, strategically aligned. All the tactics make sense. But if people will only follow through on them if they believe they can. And you have to look and identify those limiting beliefs that hold people back. And rather than firing those people and changing them, you can coach them. And then they step into that capacity. And they're so grateful because they just had a breakthrough. And they have the breakthrough on your time, on your dime. And guess how much loyal they become to the company that helped them have such an important breakthrough for themselves. So it's a gift that keeps on giving. And yes, it is a bit of a gift. Because I went through it, I can see it and I can identify. In fact, I did this podcast. I did 4 seasons of it. It's called the Rant and Grow podcast. And the first 2 seasons, when I became a certified coach, I just wanted to practice. And I'm like, I'm going to do an experiment and I'm going to invite folks that want to have free coaching, but in return, they have to be willing to be on my podcast.
That's fair deal.
And 2 seasons of this, in 30 minutes, I could identify the problem, every single guest. And I was like, this is a nice experiment because I was able to prove to myself, I might be onto something here and I might have a unique gift or ability, God-given ability to really get to the hidden problem. I'm not a therapist, but I think the desire, once you activate that empathy, you can see things that you would otherwise miss because you're so tuned in to wanting to be of service to someone that it's almost like the intuition kicks in. So between the training and that gift, I could see it. And in 30 minutes, if you listen to any of these shows, in 30 minutes, I could identify exactly what was going on. And then we develop some mantras to rewire the thinking, rewire the brain. And every single one of them gave me 5 stars because they had breakthrough transformation in their personal lives. So I've implemented that into the organization because you're making significant change. You're collaborating. Biggest challenge now, if you're the CEO, is, well, my self-worth was tied to being the boss. Now you're telling me I have to be more of a mentor.
So I was going to ask about that because you're a proponent of self-managed organizations. And what are some of the biggest fears CEOs have about decentralizing control, and how do you suggest they move through that?
The biggest fear is loss of control, but that loss of control is tied to a belief that was sold to many of us for many years. This idea that you have reached the pinnacle of your career once you become the CEO. So you climb the ladder, and once you're the CEO, you have arrived. Only to realize most of the time it's lonely up there. It's isolating and lonely, and often it's a duplicative way of living because you have to be a certain way at the office, and then at home you get to be yourself. It's exhausting in that context.
It kind of, and that's something I can relate to too, and I know other people who can, because when you do run a business, there are some times where there's people that you want to reach out to and you want to get feedback, but you have to be careful in what you share because there are unintended consequences with how people interpret your ideas and your perspectives.
Exactly.
It can open Pandora's box and create a bunch of unnecessary drama and conflict and create additional problems that you don't want or need. And that's why they have to internalize that unless, I guess I'm saying, I understand what you're saying.
It's a real thing because culturally they're part of the machine too, right? The machine spits you out if you don't play by its rules. So they imagine loss of control, they imagine chaos, but in reality, self-management requires more structure, but just the right kind. What I help CEOs is see that they can give people clear purpose and shared outcomes, but they don't need to be micromanaged. They
That's
just
fair.
need more trust, more tools, and more transparency. So there are 2 rules to self-management. Number 1, no violence, which means you can't force, or no force, right? Which means you can't force anybody to do anything. You can't coerce anybody to do things. You can't use fear tactics. No force. And number 2, 100% self-accountability, which means, hey, you're free to choose which OKR you want to participate in, but you're not free to do nothing. You are 100% accountable to create value to the company, but you get to do it on your terms. You can't bow out and say self-management, I can do whatever I want. No, it's not like that. You have accountability. Now, the difference in a command and control environment, you could be an employee that can hide out for months because you got one boss, large organization, you can hide out for months. In a self-management environment, you can't hide out for more than a week because the team will hold you accountable. Hey, what are you doing? Where are you?
It's funny you talk about the team holding you accountable. I had a guest on, his name is Rob Gallagher, and he wrote a book on profit sharing. And I probably ought to connect the two of you because like he really got me to understand. You talk about the team holding you accountable. Well, what motivates the team to hold someone accountable? In his particular argument was that if they're involved in profit sharing, then everyone's in it together, and they're always looking for ways. They don't always looking for ways. They're incentivized to find ways to capture revenue streams and to cut costs and work together better as a team for their overall good. So I'm starting to connect some dots here between what you're talking about and ways to incentivize people to actually execute what you're talking about in effective ways.
Compensation does drive behavior, but not all of it.
Agreed.
Compensation is part of the equation here, but it's a bonus, right?
Agreed.
What I'm looking for is how to activate those 4 tenets we talked about.
Fair.
When the team takes that ownership, there's a sense of autonomy and empowerment that comes with that, which is important to all of us. And then what I push for is not this family model that people talk about. We're a family. Why would you want to be a family? Families are sometimes dysfunctional. You got some family members you don't want to really spend a whole lot of time with, but you don't have a choice because they're family members. But in a friendship model, you choose your friends. And what do true friends do?
You look out for each other.
They don't compete with each other. They celebrate each other's wins. 2, they support each other when one is down. And 3, they don't sell each other out. They call each other out when one is falling off track. Hey, man, you're going off the rails here. I'm going to reel you in, right? And you can have that conversation because friendship is based on mutual love and empathy. So in a model where the team operates like friends, if you're deciding to hide out, your friends will call you out. What are you doing? What's going on here, right? And the rule in self-management is not one person can fire you, but anyone in the organization can fire, which means anyone can bring about a case to say, you're a weak link. We need to have a committee to talk to you about this. What's going on? The goal is to correct the issue, but the team can decide that you're not living the standards and the values that embody what the team wants.
You know what? And that's fair because that individual may be able to give back feedback to the team and say, you know what, thank you for coming here and let's have this conversation because I'm not getting this, I'm not getting this, I'm not getting this, I'm not getting this. And these are some things that I need from you in order to do what you want me to do, but you haven't given me these things or you haven't given me these things in a timely fashion. And if you can correct that, then the problem's solved because I will execute everything that you've given me.
That's what friends do. And that's what we're trying to create. So when you compare that model, the self-management I just described, to the traditional command and control model, it's not hard to see which one will generate better results.
Agreed. So different question.
And there are stats that prove it. That's the beautiful thing. It's not just good for people. It's strategic. It's strategic in the outcome that it can create. Way like X more profitability. This has been tracked and proven. So there's an impact it has on the business, a material impact it has on the business. So if you're the CEO and you're all about shareholder value, you're actually not all about shareholder value if you're not creating a model where people can collaborate and work together to generate that value. Because the more controls just means compliance. Compliance creates no innovation and creates disengagement. Disengagement reduces productivity.
I'm going to drop.
The opposite happens.
So I've mentioned this in one of my other interviews and podcasts, but it's very relevant here because not every person watches all of these episodes. But you talked about command and control. The downside from my perspective, and I wish I knew who the speaker was, but he talked about the power of collective genius. And what he talked about was he had a group seminar attendance and he gave everybody like an IQ test and said, hey, you got this much time, answer these questions, go. And of course, they scored them. And there was a couple of people who were very, very bright, geniuses, we'll call them. But then he said, okay, we're going to do section 2, which basically different questions, same time frame. But I want person 1, 2, 3, 4, you're a team. 1, 2, 3, 4, you're a team. 1, 2, 3, 4, you're a team. And what they found out was that all of those teams did better than the smartest individual. That was what he was making the point of, was collective genius. And when you have a command and control, even if that person on top is a genius, he is no match for the collective genius of a team working together. So I love what you're talking about, and that's why.
I mean, culture eats strategy for lunch anytime. And even from a market positioning perspective, culture is the marketing you can't fake. So it also resonates with your customers, because ultimately what you're trying to do is create a community, and that community extends internally and externally to the organization. So when you have connection, resonance, people feel supported, it translates into the experience your customers will have, i.e. the banking experience you talked about, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're very compliant, structured. It's like being run like a manufacturing, like an industrial machine. So they're using industrial revolution thinking into the modern knowledge space. It doesn't work. The modern knowledge space is all about innovation and system thinking and intelligence and empathy and creating.
I'm going to touch on another. You talked about empathy and intelligence. I'm going to give you this was not my personal experience. One of my friends is a pastor at a church and was offering some additional assistance to an elderly lady in a wheelchair and not capable of getting around, and she's widowed and in terrible health, and she needed to go to, and I'm not the type to call out the particular banks, but this particular giant bank, and he was calling on her behalf to help her get accounts. I guess he needed some kind of legal letter or something like that, some paperwork, let's call it paperwork, that needed to be signed. And it was impossible to get the branch manager to talk like an empathetic human being. It was, hi, I'm so-and-so, employee number so-and-so, and I need to disclose that this call is being recorded. And she proceeded to talk like a robot, reading her script. And the bottom line is, you have to come to the bank to get this filled out, or she has to come to the bank and sign this. And he's like, that's horrible friction, horrible work on my part as someone who's trying to help your customer. And the lady was, you have to come to the bank. You have to come to the bank. Well, long story short, they fired that bank, and the alternative bank they went with was a community bank. And guess what happened to that branch manager? Branch manager, we'll send someone out with a notary public and the paperwork you need. We'll come to you.
See,
and we'll
that's
get you taken care of.
beautiful. That's
human.
company.
That's an empathetic company. That's using intelligence and human. And the other one is robotic and manufactured. And in a world that's transforming before our eyes towards AI and things like that, these companies that are human and empathetic and use intelligence, I think are going to separate themselves quickly.
It's going to be a competitive advantage. Empathy will always win, always. And another example I give is, let's say you're going for a job interview and you decide, I'm going to go buy a suit. I mean, buying a suit is just a transaction, just like that was just a transaction. So the transaction can be done at the branch, or it could be done with someone going out with a notary public and doing it in person, being of service, right? I want to buy a suit, because what do I need the suit for? Well, I want to show up powerful. I want to be confident in this interview. That's really what I'm looking for. The suit's just a transaction. I can go buy that suit anywhere. I go visit 5 stores and I find one store where the salesperson's asked me, what are you looking for? I'm looking for a suit. What is it for? I've got an interview coming up. Oh, what kind of job is it? And they get into a conversation. It's like, so tell me, how do you want to show up at this interview? Oh, I really want to show up powerful and confident. That's what I'm striving for. A salesman says, I got 2 suits that I think will do that for you. Let me show them to you. And they happen to be the more expensive suits.
Because the person wearing it knows it's an expensive suit. That's what matters. It's not anybody else, but the person wearing it.
Now you go there and you're not really buying the suits. You're buying what the suits can give you, which aligns with what you wanted, to feel powerful and confident.
That's that feeling.
And it's a job interview, so it's important for me. So I will spend more money because I connect to this idea that it gives me the feeling, the emotion. It validates my emotion and feeling. So when I show up there, that suit that I'm wearing gives me the confidence and the power that I need to feel. It's psychological, but it's real to me. So I'm going to buy from the person that understands me, that makes me feel like you got what I need, right? It's the same transaction. Could have bought that suit anywhere, probably for less money somewhere else, but you validated what I needed. That's empathy.
That
so
same
organizations
thing
that codify that are going to always win. They're going to outcompete their competitors every time, because we don't want a transaction. We want an experience.
And I think that that applies not only for companies and employees dealing with customers, but also supervisors dealing with their direct reports.
Absolutely, because it's very human. No matter what business you're in, you are in the people to people business
Amen.
because there's always a person on the other side buying it and consuming it. And there's always a person on this side producing it and creating it. So if you take care of all the people by being empathetic, by fulfilling their emotional need, not just a transaction, earning a paycheck is a transaction. It gives me a paycheck. I can take care of my family. But what's the emotional need? I want to take care of my family. So what are you really doing when you connect that someone's working there because they're trying to take care of their family? Maybe they have an ill parent. When you connect to that, you don't talk to those people like machines. They're doing something that meaningful for them.
I'm going to throw this out. I interviewed Dr. Don Barden. He wrote the book, Here Come the Girls, and the book, The Perfect Plan. And he mentioned that based on his research that people will remember 6% of what we talked about 10 minutes later. 6%. Those are the words, the manufactured, scripted words. But they remember 100% of how you made them feel.
100%, always. I mean, you look at a commercial that makes you feel something. You don't even remember what it was or what they said, but you remember the feeling. Now, if the commercial's done it well, you'll remember the brand and the feeling. So you connect the brand to the feeling, and you're like, I don't know what they were selling, but let me look them up because I really like what they were talking about.
So on that same note, since we're talking about people, and you've heard companies say that people are our greatest asset, but then they build systems that just burn them out. In your opinion, how can leaders scale their business without scaling the stress that goes along with it?
Well, first of all, stop calling people resources and assets. Change the language. They're not assets. They're not goods. They're not cogs on the wheel. They're people. So I've always made it a point to stop using terms like resources, human capital, assets. They're people. Let's talk about what we talk about, people. And then the other important thing is to keep in mind that each one of those people have needs. And they're also adults, which make difficult decisions every day. Where to live, whether to have children, whether they get married, whether they get divorced, whether they get an operation, whatever decision they need to make. These are complex decisions. They're perfectly capable of it. If they have the right information, they can make difficult decisions. So if you equip them with what they need to make difficult decisions, they will make good decisions. And if you create a model where they can collaborate, then you have the collective wisdom that comes to making decisions, which is way better than one person. So treat people like not assets, but as partners and as friends.
That would get rid of unnecessary stress. Because I'm convinced that most of the stress that employees have is when they don't know why they're doing something. And there's this universe of possibilities that no one's bothered to explain to them, and there's fear of the unknown. Like, how's that going to affect me? How's this going to affect my family? I get it. So if you're scaling, you're going through the employers who take the time to make sure that their employees know what they're doing and why they're doing it, that extra step of here's why.
And one of the best ways to do that, Mason, you mentioned earlier, a lot of executives are afraid to show up vulnerably and admit that something's off track or they even made a mistake. Because in most cultures, that's an opportunity for someone to come in and basically get you out of your job. Okay, that happens. Right. Those politics happen. It's sad. But if you want to transform into a model where there's collaboration and connection becomes key, then when you are vulnerable, when you are powerfully vulnerable as a leader, you create psychological safety. Your job is to create psychological safety because the truth, although sometimes hard to hear, is how you can have the awareness of where you are right now as a business, and you can work with that. You can move forward from that reality instead of pushing this aspirational version of the truth, which is fantasy, and having everyone step into this fantasy. That doesn't help your business. That holds your business back. So be the first one to say, I screwed up, guys, and I need some help fixing it. Any ideas how we can fix this? But you see, when you create collaboration, you can do that, which is why I said, in the process of collaborating, don't be the boss. Be a member of the team, but be the first one to showcase and model how to be open, how to create intimacy. I think I did something that put me off track here. I'd love some help. What do you guys think? Let's talk about it. Now, guess what happens to the employees watching this? They're like, oh, it's safe to say when things aren't going great, and it's safe to ask for help.
That's leadership by example.
It doesn't make me look less competent. It just makes me look human to ask for help. It's actually mature to ask for help. I'm being modeled as by the quote unquote boss. So when you change your consciousness to being empathetic, to being of service, to creating a place where people can work as friends, you have to set the example by being the most vulnerable. The most vulnerable is the most powerful because it creates openness and intimacy. And in that intimacy and in that openness, in that collaboration, you become unstoppable. You cannot compete with a team like that. You cannot compete with a company like that. It's impossible to compete with them. So far ahead, their ability to outthink you is so fast because they have the collective wisdom, not just 2-3 people at the top. They have the collective wisdom of an organization moving them forward.
Like, I know you've worked with startups and billion-dollar companies. Are there some scaling mistakes that both make?
I think the biggest mistake startups make is this excuse of we're a startup, so things move fast and change fast. I believe that's actually just an excuse to justify why your leadership may not be up to par to create the kind of systems thinking that can get everybody in alignment. Alignment is key even in a startup. Yes, you're moving fast, but you're going to be able to move faster if you decentralize all the decision making and get the team involved. So that's what happens. A lot of startups, the co-founders do very well because they work in a level of equivalence. Then they start hiring people and they're not getting the same traction because they treat them as employees. So what you want to do is maintain this co-founder connection model and bring everyone into this mindset of collaborating as a teammate, as co-owners, as co-leaders. Then you can scale that co-founder working quickly kind of a thing. Important thing, as you scale, maintain that mindset, that alignment, create systems where people can collaborate systematically in a way that's organized. And if you have to pivot, you can pivot quickly because you're doing it together. So, in large organizations, there's too many layers of management. Break down the silos of friction points. You know, it's hard to move a large company to self-management, but you could do it in departments. You can pick a division and say, let's work on this division. Let's break the model down. Let's get more collaboration. And then you can watch that organization transform and you can measure the impact it's having. And then you can do another division and another division. So it's a systematic approach. It'll probably take 5 years for $1 billion company to transform in that direction. And there's different versions of this. There's the full-blown self-managed, and then there's versions of it that fit within the model where you are. But ultimately, the collaboration and the breakdown of silos, creating more pods, that cross-functional collaboration, cross-functional pods is the key to moving things faster and maintaining that startup mentality even in a large organization. But the biggest challenge is egos.
Okay.
You got to check your egos. If you are a CEO that understands that your job is to be of service and to enable others to self-realize, you have the right mindset, and your company is going to be a highly collaborative company. If you are the command and control CEO who thrives in the power and the prestige of being the CEO, you're going to have a highly disengaged organization. You have to be of service.
Let's talk, and I appreciate your time. I got just a couple quick questions for you because I'm learning a lot. And I could probably talk to you for hours. I'm enjoying every minute of this. Let's talk a little bit about AI and ethical tech. What's the intersection of EQ and AI leadership, and how do companies get that balance right, in your opinion?
So AI can process things faster, not in all cases. There's actually some cases where AI has slowed people down. But it can't feel, it has no volition, and it has no curiosity, which is highly human. So leaders need to ensure the emotional intelligence of their culture isn't outsourced to code. You'll end up with a very clinical, cold environment with no competitive advantage. We've already spoken about how empathy always wins. So the other challenge is most AI adoptions are failing. There are studies that show as many as 70% of them are being abandoned. And the reason for it is because what AI is doing is bubbling up the dysfunctionality of most organizations. AI thrives in decentralized environments, agile, decentralized, autonomous environments. So if you've got a lot of rubber stamps or a lot of silos, a lot of departments that need to go through checks and balances and approvals, AI is not going to work for you. It's like bringing in a super employee and then having all these controls in place. It's not going to work. So they're being abandoned, not because the technology isn't right, it's the organizational structure isn't right. AI, the adoption of AI requires change management, organizational redesign, and it needs to be treated like another employee or team coming into the organization. The best way I can describe it is think of like implementing AI as having done an acquisition. You're literally integrating a new company into your business. Now, this new company, you acquired it because it had some intrinsic values that you don't have. So you don't want to discard their processes in the system. You want to implement them and integrate them. Good post-M&A integration takes the best of all the companies acquired and creates new systems, new models that can have everyone step into a process that works for everyone. So think of like implementing AI as if you just went through an M&A transaction and you are integrating a new company that has probably the most effective, fastest models in the market. How do you integrate that seamlessly? Well, you have to make some changes to your own organization to implement that properly. You can't just implement it. It has to be seamlessly implemented. You have to remove the friction for that company to be integrated. And that's probably a more effective way to adopt AI, to think of it as an M&A transaction that needs to be integrated with change management at the core of it. And most of companies are still not getting that, and they're failing because it's being driven as a technology play, but it isn't. It is an organizational redesign in order for it to work. So you can benefit tremendously by AI if you integrate it correctly, if you have the right mindset on how it could work. But in most companies be like, let's just bring it in and automate everything. And then they're going to find themselves a year later that what they're doing doesn't resonate in the market because it sounds clinical and cold, like that bank you were talking about. They're in for a rude awakening if they don't realize you have to integrate it to enhance your empathy in the marketplace.
I'm going to piggyback on that because you're touching another one of my hot buttons. So one of my dear friends was an executive at a very large multi-billion-dollar company and lost the role. And now is finding out that, because we're talking high level, years of experience, and is being told that real people aren't even seeing her resume. It's AI scanning everything. And she told me of a company that conducted 3 virtual interviews, all AI. She didn't talk to a real person, thought she did, all AI. And then they offer a position. She's like, when she found out that it was all AI, she's like, I don't want to work in a company like that. I'm not a robot.
Good decision.
And the company that did that lost the perspective of it being a two-way street. Not only do they need to appeal and offer a job, but there's another side of that decision, and that's, does the person want to work there? And while the company that was doing that could say, look how efficient we are, look how fast we are, look how we're getting exactly what we need, blah, 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 the person on the receiving end said, that's not human. That's not empathetic. I'm a real human, and I don't want to spend my life and my knowledge and my talent and my experience. I didn't work this long to develop this skill, knowledge, experience, and intelligence to be put into a machine and treated like a robot.
Good for her.
I understand what you're saying.
My attitude is don't even respond, especially at the executive levels. If the first step is some survey or some automated thing, I'm like, you're not going to engage with me that way. We're going to have a conversation. Because efficiency should not trump relationship. Connection is the highest form. In business,
can you say that again?
Efficiency should never trump connection, relationships.
100% agree.
On relationships first. Build relationship. Then build efficiencies once you've got that figured out. And otherwise, it just feels cold and clinical, and you end up having digital overlords.
And I'm not convinced that many companies don't get those reversed. They look for the efficiency, and then they try to jam everyone into their systems.
Here's the flaw of that, too. AI, you could be responding with AI right there because you don't have a human being. Like, you could use AI and give the perfect response, right? So when you do it in person, and by the way, I think resumes will eventually go away because I can use AI to match it exactly to the job spec and make me look perfect for the job, right? I think that in-person conversation where you're actually on the spot testing someone's critical thinking by having a question about, like, this is the thing we're trying to solve. What do you think about that, right? You don't want them to solve the problem, but you want to see their critical thinking and their process of ideas on how they go through solving that problem. Because ultimately, that's the true win, is the ability to be curious enough to solve things that have never been solved before. You could use AI to help you think through that, to speed through that, but ultimately it's your intelligence that's going to shine. So in that interview process, they didn't get to actually see whether she has the critical thinking necessary to fit into an organization that's focused to it. And the reason for it is because they're probably not focused on it. They're focused on efficiency, production, cog in the machine. And I wouldn't work there either. And a lot of these organizations, and I actually spoke with a VC last year and I said, where are things going? What do you think is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years? And she said, Tullio, in the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see an emergence of a lot more people offering like coaching on how to have social skills, on how to, like, you're going to see the Renaissance again.
I agree with that.
People needing to connect to art and poetry and being able to interact with other human beings, being able to have social skills. I'm like, that's a scary reality that we're walking into if we're not careful on how.
Because I'm totally dating myself, but I'm used to actually talking to people or picking up a phone and talking to somebody, a text or a,
Me too.
Connect with me on Snapchat or whatever. I mean, can I do it? Sure. But there's no substitute to me to be able to hear someone's inflection of their voice, their passion, their energy, their enthusiasm or lack thereof about any particular topic. To me, that's how we talked about earlier with Dr. Barden's research about 6% people remember 6% of what they heard, but 100% how they feel. Like, I know how I feel interacting with real humans, and I know how I.
Well, I mean, here's your friend who wasn't validated as a human being.
Correct.
All she was validated is that she fits into the machine as a cog.
Right.
Who's going to be excited about that? Now, if you need to take care of your family, you do what you have to do to take care of your family. But I guarantee you're not going to have a highly engaged employee. They're going to be quiet quitting the minute they start.
Doing enough not to get fired.
Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Because we're putting a lot of attention on efficiency over relationships.
And people will do enough not to get fired.
Connection. The highest form of business is connection. Connection. It's all about connection. Human connection. If you miss that point, you're
so. Last question, and then I'm going to ask how people can connect with you. So, what's one old school belief about leadership that you think will be totally obsolete in 5 years?
Don't bring your emotions to work. That mindset is already on its way out. Emotions are data. Ignoring them leads to blind spots. And really, the future belongs to emotionally attuned leaders who know how to use empathy as a strategic advantage. Case in point, if you have AI that's tracking productivities of employees and sees a dip in productivity on one particular employee, and it automatically generates a PIP for that employee. Hey, we've noticed a drop in the past 2 weeks, 40% dip in productivity. Here's a performance improvement plan for you. Now, the AI doesn't know that person just lost a loved one and they're mourning, they're in pain, and they just need a little love and kindness for a few weeks. They just need a break. Be happy they're back at work, they're doing the best they can, and maybe they've been loyal for many years, but now they need a little love and support. Give it to them. The machine's not going to be capable of doing that. So this idea of removing emotions from work, you'll end up with people that are disconnected. Emotion's a data point. We are emotional creatures.
I appreciate you sharing that.
We're emotional creatures. Embrace it.
That's a message that I want to blast everywhere. And I couldn't agree with you more. I really appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. So if people wanted to learn more about you, the work you do in your company, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Everything's on my website, my social handles. It's TullioSiragusa.com.
You want to spell that for them? Because you got 2 L's in Tullio.
TullioSiragusa.com.
It's been a pleasure having you on, and hopefully we can stay connected, reconnect, maybe have one of these conversations sooner rather than later. It's been a pleasure having you on, and I hope everyone else listening and watching enjoyed this as much as I did and learned as much as I did. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mason.